It is time for player number 2 of our season in review of 2022 and more rhyming things, probably, on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jerry Foster, here to bring you all of the news, the stories, the trials, tribulations, joys, the agonies of your favourite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, and I appreciate you for stopping on by, whether you are watching or listening. Then make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app of choice or over on YouTube. Get the episodes right on your feed. So, like I said at the top of the show, we're on to our second player review of the season. This one's going to be kind of a different one to the first one. So on Wednesday, we talked about Sean Kuraly and kind of the impact he had on the Blue Jackets and how happy we were today, because I decided that I was going to talk about everyone who wore a Blue Jackets jersey this season, no matter if it was for one game or if it was for all 82. We're going to be talking about Kevin Stenlund, who played 3 games as a Blue Jacket this season, I believe. 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 points. 2 penalty minutes, 3 shots on goal, and that was his stat line for the season. So we'll get into a little bit more detail in a little bit, but I just want to give a little bit of preamble. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today, and we're also going to take a look at his work in the AHL, because I feel like it's not like he was injured all season. He has been playing, he has been developing as a Blue Jackets prospect, just not on the team, which is kind of a shame because, and I guess this is a really good place to start. Last season, he basically became a full-time NHL player in my eyes. Anyway, he only played 32 games, but most of those 32 games, I think, were towards the tail end of the season. It looked like he'd really taken a step forward in his development. He was looking like he was going to be a really good bottom 6 guy for the Blue Jackets. He plays center. Blue Jackets needed center. And then I'm not sure what happened in terms of how he managed to fall so far in the depth chart, because I watched him in training camp, I watched him in preseason, and I don't know that he was necessarily playing badly, but it looks like, obviously, the likes of Cole Sillinger coming to camp and having a really good camp, Igor Chidakov coming to camp having a really great Traverse City tournament, like that made it a little bit harder for Brad Larson to find room for Kevin Stenlund. Obviously, Gus Nyquist coming back from injury, I think that pushed, because that's the thing. I always forget that he missed the entirety of last season, and so it was basically like having a brand new player that they had to fit in the depth chart. Because he wasn't around last year, and so that obviously automatically pushed everyone down a spot. And I think Kevin Stenlund was one of those guys that was kind of right on the cusp. It was kind of him and Liam Foodie kind of stuck around the longest in terms of preseason and maybe making the opening night roster. Eventually, they both got sent back down. Both got sent down to Cleveland, which we'll talk about Liam Foodie later on in this kind of quote unquote series, because again, I think he only played 1 game as a Blue Jacket this season, but I think he's somebody else that it's important to talk to you about in terms of his AHL season and kind of how he's doing developmentally. But Kevin Stenlund seems to have taken a huge step back in his development, and I don't know whether that's that he was kind of taking advantage of a very injured and very bad Blue Jackets team last season. I don't know if he has the kind of game that was way more well suited to, a John Tortorella than a Brad Larson, because I think Brad Larson learned a lot from John Tortorella, but I also think he has a very different coaching style, a much better coaching style, I would say. And I don't know whether Kevin Stenlund really kind of gelled with that. So he played 3 games this season. Like I said at the top, he played. They were all in November. He played November 6th, November 12th, and November 13th. He played almost 8 minutes in the first game, almost 11 minutes in the second game. In the third game, he only played 3 minutes and 48 seconds. So, like, the writing really kind of felt on the wall there. I wasn't surprised when he was unceremoniously sent back down. I talked about this on Monsters Musings, actually. I was very surprised that he was one of the guys that was called up, because that, I believe, was around the time that um, Kukan went out with a knee injury, and I believe Anabokus went out with an injury as well, and also that was about the time that Patrick Laine got hurt as well, and so there was a lot of guys called up, playing a couple of games, guys getting sent back down. Kevin Stenlund was one of those guys, and he didn't really make the most of the opportunity that he was given. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit in just a minute. And, the AHL, why I was surprised that he got called up and kind of how he did this season in the AHL. But first, I want to tell you about Built Bar because you know what? I love brownies. But you know what? Better than brownies? Brownie batter. Because, if I'm making brownies, the problem is I always feel like I'm eating half of the batter just while I'm making them. And you are in luck if you are like me, because Built Bar has a brand new creation, and this one is better than ever. They've got the Brownie Batter Puff. This takes protein bars to a whole new level, and they're available right now on Built.com. If you haven't tried a Built Puff yet, then I'm really not sure what you're waiting for. They are chocolate-covered, protein-infused marshmallows. They are delicious. They are nutritious, dipped in 100% real chocolate. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 7 grams of sugar. Brownie batter puffs are the perfect pick me up for any day. I love the built puffs. The brownie batter puffs are just head and shoulders above any of the other bars, in my opinion. So, honestly, if you want to take my advice, go to built.com right now and get yourself some brownie batter puffs because they will just improve no matter what kind of day you're having, a built puff will improve it, especially if it's brownie batter. So here's the best bit. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You can get 15% off your order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So let's talk about Kevin Stenlund in the AHL. When he was called up, I was very surprised, and we talked about this on Monsters Musings, the AHL podcast that I do over at Field Pass Hockey, about, whoa, why did Kevin Stenlund get called up? Why would they not call up, Brendan Gaunce, who I believe was leading the team in scoring at the time? Obviously, he would get the call later on, but at the time, I was looking at them and I was like, Kevin Stenlund has not been very good in the AHL this season, and I think it kind of went down to, well, they'd rather have their younger guys who they think are going to be better in the AHL develop it. So, like your Trey Fix-Wolanskis, for example. He was another guy that I thought could have called up, and they were like, well, taking Kevin Stenlund out of the AHL lineup probably won't impact them too much. And honestly, he's going to play obviously he ended up playing about 20 minutes over 3 games in his call up. So, I think it would have been he wasn't going to change the game either way, and so I think that's kind of who they picked and why. But in total, Kevin Stenlund, who in fairness was injured at the tail end of the season, so didn't play a full season, and he did pick it up. He had 42 games, 25 points, 8 goals, 17 assists. So not terrible, but certainly not what you'd expect for someone that I had kind of picked them as being someone who's probably going to dominate in the AHL this season. So it's I don't know. It was a really weird situation, and he didn't look dominant even when he's playing. Some guys I feel like are not scoring, but you can tell that it's line mates or something's not quite right. And he just I don't know. And the AHL doesn't give you any kind of underlying stats because the AHL doesn't even give you like ice time. So it's hard to tell how much Kevin Stenlund was actually playing, but it just wasn't. It wasn't the season I was expecting for Kevin Stenlund, and doesn't worry me necessarily in terms of what's coming next. We're going to talk in a minute about what I think Kevin Stenlund needs to do next season to kind of get back on track because I do think he took a step back this season. I don't think that was, entirely his fault. I think partial injuries, partially just getting past on the depth chart. I mean, the thing about Kevin Stenlund is he was a second round pick in 2015, and you want a guy like that to be established now. It's yeah, like that's kind of all it is. You want a guy like that to be in a second round pick. You would want in the bottom six by now. You wouldn't want a guy that's kind of floating around. And I do wonder, is this just as good as Kevin Stenlund is going to be? Is he going to be kind of a bubble guy? He's 25 years old, so he's still got a couple more years to kind of make an impact and figure out what's going on, where he's going to be, etc. He is an RFA at the end of this season, so the Blue Jackets own his rights, but I don't know if they give him a qualifying offer, honestly. Just for a variety of reasons, which we are going to talk about in just a minute. But first, I've got to tell you about BetOnline because I don't know about you, but I feel like I should have put some money on taking the over for the Oilers Flames playoff game that happened last night, where everyone scored a goal and the goalies just didn't exist. And I could have done that over at BetOnline because they are the official sports bet. They are the official They are the official sports betting website for the Locked On Podcast Network, and they continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, we've got boxing, UFC, even next season's NFL futures, and of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action because BetOnline is where the game starts. So at the end of the last segment, I talked about Kevin Stenlund, RFA. Do the Blue Jackets bring him back? And when I was looking at kind of the RFAs and talking about this with Dina Weinhammer, my co-host over at Monsters Musings, the AHL podcast that I do, I was like, oh yeah, they'll probably re-sign him. And thinking about it, I'm wondering if they do or not, because here's the thing. I don't think Kevin Stenlund offers this team anything that they cannot get from a player like Eric Robinson or a player like Cole Sillinger, one of whom is a big guy that has no qualms about throwing his weight around, and the other is probably going to be a middle six center for this team, maybe even a number one center. And I don't know that Kevin Stenlund can offer the team the skill of Eric Robinson or the ceiling of Cole Sillinger. And I wonder if they just decide, we won't qualify you. We'll let you become a UFA, and you could walk. Which I assume is if that happens, he will go there. He will then go on and have a very long and successful career of scoring against the monsters in the AHL for the next 10 years. But I would love to. I love Kevin Stenlund, and I think he has some real potential. But I don't know if he has a future with this team, and I don't know if there's a version of the Blue Jackets, especially when you look at, they've got guys like Kirill Marchenko coming over. We don't know who they're going to take in the draft. They pick 6th overall and 12th overall. One of those guys could be NHL ready. We could have another Cole Sillinger on our hands. And so it's getting tougher and tougher to look at a guy like Kevin Stenlund and say, yeah, we'll give him more time. I mean, even looking at the other guys, Liam Foodie's an RFA. I think that obviously they're going to re-sign him. They're going to re-sign Trey Fix-Wolansky. Josh Dunn is kind of in that same boat of Kevin Stenlund, I think, but he's 2 years younger and probably will not will not garner as much of the cap as Kevin Stenlund. So we'll uh, we'll see. We'll kind of keep an eye on it. Obviously, as free agency gets closer and closer, I don't know that we see any kind of real movement before the draft. But yeah, I genuinely don't know if we see Kevin Stenlund in a Blue Jackets jersey next season. Whether that's because he signs an AHL only contract and just kind of accepts that he's probably not going to be an NHL player, which I don't necessarily think is true. I mean, we've seen. I mean, look at that's the other thing is look at Justin Danforth, 29 years old, making his NHL debut and stuck around all season. Like there's it happens all the time. Look at the oldest man alive, Michael Bunting, making his finally getting to play his rookie season and winning the he's not winning the Calder. That was a slip of the tongue. Morris Satter's winning the Calder, but being nominated for the Calder. We've seen it before of guys who have kind of hung on and hung on and hung on, and then suddenly at 27 they explode and they're like, yeah, no, I'm going to be in the NHL permanently now. So it could happen with Stenlund. I don't know that it will. I will be surprised if it will. But I also would love to see it happen, and I wouldn't be mad about it because, like, I really like Kevin Stenlund. I like his game. I think he has a lot of things to offer. I just think that all of the things that add up to make Kevin Stenlund are things we can get from other players that are, like I said, a little bit either more established, um, like Eric Robinson, who really kind of, like I talked about in yesterday's episode, really kind of cemented his place on the team with that fourth line of him and Corrali and Alexander Texier. And I who do you kick off this roster to put Kevin Stenlund on, especially with if Texier comes back, which I assume he will. Looking at the rest of the roster, we're adding Marchenko. Kent Johnson will be around. They're just I don't see him. I don't see him having a future on the Blue Jackets. He could very well go on to have a future on another NHL team, which again I think probably will happen if the Blue Jackets let him go, because that's what happens to players that the Blue Jackets let go, is that they go on to have excellent careers elsewhere. But that's beside the point. Just to kind of finish up, in terms of Kevin Stenlund, I realized I didn't give him like a letter grade or anything like that. I did the Twitter poll, and it was basically universal, um, and pretty harsh. And I think everyone except like two voters gave him a D on the season, which I think is harsh, but not necessarily unjustified. I didn't. I'm going to be sneaky here. I didn't give this as an option because I ran out of options. But honestly, I'm going to give him an incomplete on the season on account of the fact that he played 3 NHL games and then 30 something AHL games. 42 AHL games. So he didn't even play a full season down in Cleveland because he got injured and missed the last like month and a half of the season because the injury curse for Cleveland was just atrocious this season. So I'm going to give him an incomplete because I don't think it's fair to say, hey, look how terrible this guy's season was when he didn't get to play a full season. So, like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with all the people giving him a D, especially when you look at just the body of work that he has for Columbus. Because, no matter how you look at it, he should have been able to make an impact in those 3 games and get more than 4 minutes of ice time in a game against New York, which I don't know. I feel like the team probably lost that one because I don't know that they beat New York all season, but that's beside the point. I would like to see Kevin Stenlund again. I don't know if we will. And that's kind of it for my season review of Kevin Stenlund. I feel like I tried to be diplomatic, but also realistic. So I don't know if that quite came off, but hopefully it did. Tomorrow we will be doing another season in review. I haven't looked at my list of players, but I feel like the next guy on the list is Kent Johnson. So that will be coming up next. tomorrow. In fact, that will be coming up tomorrow on Locked On Blue Jackets. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. Well, no, that's the show Twitter. You can find us there. You can find me at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. If you would like to follow the podcast on YouTube, then please do so. I am waiting to hit 100 subscribers. When I do, I'll be giving away a Rick Nash puck from his jersey retirement night. So that's pretty cool, I think, anyway. And thank you once again for making us your first listen of the day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. You are never going to have to get behind a paywall for Locked On content. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.